Okay, make sure you put the truck. It's the 2002 Chevrolet Silverado, and it's actually in here for air conditioner problems, which is pretty handy for us, but it has other trouble too that she wants looked after. And we found something a minute ago right down here. That line, that transmission cooler line is leaking down there. It's going to wet the end of the radiator and the hose and all that. You see that, Harrison? See it over? You got to go come around the other side of me. See it? See that? It's that old greasy mess there. Now, she didn't even know that was a problem, but what it does is eventually going to soften that hose, and it's going to bust the radiator hose, and she could have some serious issues there. So, looking at your sheet here, now you're basically going to, where's the air conditioner system label? Now, this presupposes you're looking on a brand new vehicle. But see right here, this is the air conditioner system label that has pretty much been obliterated by time and heat and everything else that goes on under the hood. But the labels will typically be here. Sometimes you'll see them on top of the accumulator on these GM cars, and some of them, I mean, they're all, I believe, supposed to have a label, but they just don't all have one, you know, by age and everything else. But this particular one, according to the label, what kind of refrigerant is used in this vehicle, what do you know? You're going to know it's what? What do we use in today's, at the present time? Now, there's a new refrigerant coming that's about $50 a pound, you know, 1234 is what they call it. But what do you, this is 134A, you know about that? You know, 134A is a refrigerant that replaced the chlorofluoromethane, which was R12, because of the, you know, the chlorine that was in there. All right, so this one here has definitely got to check your box. I mean, check your box. And where to get your sheet on that air conditioner stuff. Now, this is going to have the location of the air conditioner label is on top of the radiator support, basically, is what they would call this, even though it's, you know, so there's a plastic on there. The radiator support is actually this piece of metal that goes across here that the radiator mounts to. So that's where it's actually going to be now, the underhood label. All right, now then, we've got the R134 is what you're going to put for your next thing, because that's what this particular system has in it. And the boiling point of R134 is about 21 degrees below zero. Now, one of the things I like to tell you guys about air conditioning, come over this way and get behind me there, and is one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about air conditioning, and we're not actually doing any work, so I don't know if we're wearing any safety glasses, right? 134 is actually going to come, the evaporator, basically, and what's your next question there? Is the capacity of the system. You don't know yet. The older systems used to take from 2 to 3 pounds of refrigerant. The newer, is a can of refrigerant that you buy in the store a pound? Is it? Or it's not. What is it? I don't know. 12 to 14 ounces usually. It's not a whole pound. But when we put it out of our machine, we're actually putting 16-ounce pounds in there. But this one here, we don't know how much it's holding because this is gone, and you know, somebody could look it up and they could find out on that kind of thing. So Worley, go find out on a 2002 Sierra with a 5.3 in it how much refrigerant the system holds. I mean, how much R134 it holds, and come back and give us that information. Okay, now what we got on this one for our next question is, you know, we don't know how many ounces it takes. Where's the compressor on this one? Remember where the compressor is on it? The compressor is actually what they're driven by the belts, and it's way down at the bottom. I mean, on this one here, it's way down there. You know, it's very difficult to see. I mean, I could, if we had a lot of this junk here off, I could probably point you to it, but it's down on the bottom on that side, and it has its own belt and its own belt tensioner on this. Hey, go ahead and get your written test done, and then I got an electrical bug for you. Okay. All right, now then. What we need to know next, let's see our paperwork next we got right here, is where's the condenser? Anybody know what the condenser is and where it is? Where's the condenser? And what does the condenser do? The condenser's in front of the radiator. When you look through the grill on a truck and you see something in there that looks like a radiator, that ain't the radiator. If it's got air conditioning on it, you're looking at the condenser. The air that's coming in the front of this truck, the first thing it sees is that condenser. Now here's another little trick that's kind of advanced, but you might want to remember it. If you're thinking that your condenser may be partially stopped up on the inside so that it's not actually doing its job, you can spray cool water on it. And when you spray that cool water on it, it ought to dry off of there really fast, all over the place evenly. But if there's a place where it stays wet, then that condenser is stopped up on the inside there. And I'm talking about where the refrigerant goes through.
How big is the engine?
Yeah, a 5.3. Yeah. Okay, so this is the condenser. The condenser's mounted in front of the radiator. Now on Brandon Ballard's Dodge and on a lot of Hondas, the condenser is mounted to the side. The radiator will be mounted here, the condenser will be mounted there, so that both the radiator and the condenser are getting equal amounts of air, and there's nothing behind them. You know, like this one, all of the air that's cooling the coolant is going to go through the condenser and through the radiator. And this fan right here is actually going to, you know, pull all of that through there. Now, here's something else. It's another little thing I'm not going to charge you anything for. Let's say somebody's got an electric fan, a car with an electric fan on, like that Taurus over there. And let's say that car runs hot when you're driving, but it runs cool when you're sitting still. That sounds strange, doesn't it? Runs cool sitting still, but runs hot when you're driving. What I want you to do, when the fan kicks on, I want you to see which way it's blowing, because the fan's supposed to be pulling air through that way. It's not supposed to be blowing out. And on some of them, they'll get these aftermarket fans that don't have a connector to plug in, and what they'll do is they'll hook the fan up backwards so that it's actually, because if you reverse the polarity, you're going to have it going the other way. And, you got your test there?
I got a pencil.
Oh, you don't have a pencil? He came without a pencil?
Got to grab it.
Well, look at that. Right now I don't have one either. I don't even have a Sharpie. Get one of those magic markers off the tray in there. All right, now then, let's take the condensers in front of the radiator. Everybody knows what that is now. Now describe the location of the evaporator is where? You know what the evaporator is? What is, oh, incidentally, what does the condenser do? We'll cover that in a minute, okay? I don't want to jump too far ahead of you. I'm just going to tell you where the stuff is. The condenser's out here. The compressor's down there. The evaporator is in there. It's in the truck, inside the dash. And basically, you have it fixed. There's a fan pulling air across the condenser. There's a fan pulling air across the evaporator. Both of these items are what we call, listen to this, you ready? Heat exchangers. You ever heard that? Now, if you see something that's made out of tubes and it's got fins, that's a heat exchanger. You got it? Now, everybody understand that? If you see anything that's got tubes and fins, it's a heat exchanger. You know, I'm talking about like power steering cooler or anything else. And even these brake lines are sort of designed. This one here is not exactly that way, but on a lot of these vehicles, those brake lines, whenever they come out of the master cylinder, they make this here loops on the way in, and that's a sort of a heat exchanger design. What you got here for refrigerant?
Well, it said 3 different refrigerant charge, 0.8 refrigerant charge with front and rear AC, 1.2, and then refrigerant charge suburban with front and rear AC, 1.4.
Yeah. So if it's just got front, what do we have?
1.8.
1.8
pounds.
1.8 pounds. How many ounces is that? How many ounces in a pound?
16.
16 ounces in a pound. So 1.8. So what's 0.8 pounds?
13.
Huh? That's about 13 in that. Okay, so you're going to have 16 and 13 is what?
29.
29. Well, you guys, 29 ounces more or less, right? Now, a lot of these systems, they have like 1 pound or 8/10 of a pound or something like that nowadays. The newer systems are really tight. They're not as prone to leak, and they also have a tendency to require less refrigerant. And on some of them, when the refrigerant gets a little low, it'll cool good on one side of the car, but bad on the other side. It's real strange the way these things are set up. Anyway, that part in there is the evaporator. There's a fan in there blowing air across the evaporator and pushing it into your face where you'll be cool.
The blower motor.
Huh?
The blower motor and
yep,
fan.
That's the blower motor. It's a squirrel cage fan. And there's a fan out here, which is this big one, or an electric fan on a lot of vehicles. Like that Crown Victoria over there is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, but it's got an electric fan on it. So you basically have an electric fan on some vehicles that don't. Why would we put an electric fan on a car like that one over there when we could very easily bolt a fan to the water pump fully?
Frees up more horsepower.
It does. If that fan that's got that clutch on it, see, I can take this fan on his GMC and just turn it freely. That helps the engine not have to pull air all the time. And if that fan motor ever locks up, or I mean if that fan clutch ever locks up, it'll rob horsepower from you and it'll sound like there's an airplane taking off. Ooh, you know, when you rev the engine up, it's real loud. So if you ever hear that hogwash and somebody's complaining about a lack of power, before you check your spark plugs and get your scan tool out and everything, grab that fan and see if it moves freely. And if it's seized up and you can't move it, you found your first problem that you need to fix, okay? Now, since refrigerant boils at such a low temperature, 21 below, you got an accumulator receiver dryer. It actually is able to absorb heat as it's turning from a liquid into a gas. It absorbs heat like all liquid does. Okay, so the accumulator or receiver dryer. Now, what's the difference between those two? Have you ever heard talking about that? That's the accumulator over there. See it? See that big silver can? This one here has actually got some insulatory stuff on it because it has a tendency to sweat like a glass of tea. You've seen that, haven't you? As a matter of fact, you've probably seen it sometimes if the humidity's right and everything comes together, that this right here will actually have ice on it. And even in the hot summertime, it'll be like really frozen. There it is over there. What you said, describe the location. Where would you say it is? This place back here, by the way, is not called the firewall by engineers anymore. They call it the bulkhead. And when you talk about the passenger compartment, that doesn't mean the place where the passenger rides. It means the whole cabin of the vehicle where people sit. This is the engine room, and that's the passenger compartment over there. So you got two different rooms here. You got a room for the engine, a room for the passenger. Somebody the other day I sent out there to do something, and when they looked it up, they said it was that one of y'all? They were looking for something. They said it was in the passenger compartment, and they were looking under the dash on that side of the car because they assumed that the passenger and driver were two different people in relation to the way that shop manual was worded. Passenger compartment is anything on that side of the firewall. I call it the firewall. They call it the bulkhead. Technically, if this caught fire, it should stop a fire from getting all over you, shouldn't it? So people call it a firewall, but they're going to call it the bulkhead, and they got some other name for it. It's at the bulkhead, right at the entrance to the evaporator. That's what I'd call that. Okay. Now then, let's see our next thing here. Okay. They want to know: does it use an expansion valve or does it use an orifice tube? Okay, in order to explain, or in order to understand that, you're going to have to know why those are even necessary. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit of something about how these air conditioning systems work. The refrigerant that you put in there, everybody knows that you call it Freon, and you put that in there. And the reason that that's even necessary, how many of you guys have ever stuck your, got out of the shower or the swimming pool when the wind was blowing a little bit and you're cold? Same principle. The water's evaporating off your skin, and it's carrying heat away. That's what it basically does. All right, now, water is a pretty decent refrigerant. As a matter of fact, there's been air conditioners that use water. I've got one in the other shop over we sometimes use in the summertime, and it actually pumps water up over these cardboard things that air can pull through, and whenever it's trickling down, it's pulling air in from the outside through this cardboard stuff, and that water is actually evaporating and pulling heat out of the air as it does so. And then when it blows out that nozzle on the top of it, it's 15 degrees cooler than the air in the shop. So it kind of air conditions the shop, you see. Well, this refrigerant is actually doing that in a closed system. You're actually not ever supposed to be seeing or breathing refrigerant or anything like that. As a matter of fact, R134 is a little bit flammable. It's not bad flammable, but it's a little bit flammable. And it can catch fire, but it won't usually. But what's bad about it is some of the people that make this cheap refrigerant want to mix butane. How many of you fill a butane bottle, you know how cold it gets? They say, well, if this works, we can take some butane and we can actually mix it with refrigerant, and if it's compatible with the oil's the compressor, we can put that in our air conditioner. But if you have some kind of an accident and you breach the evaporator and you fill the car up with butane, and then there's some kind of a spark, you've got a fireball of epic proportions. That's just not a good plan. That's why my refrigerant identifier alerts me if there's any hydrocarbon gas in the, which would be anything flammable, butane, propane, or anything like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to let this refrigerant that we're putting in here, this R134, which is what this one takes, and And we're going to let that refrigerant just be static in the system to begin with. Now, there's not any good numbers on static refrigerant, in other words, pressures. If you put the gauge on there, you're going to actually see, like, usually in the cool weather, you'll probably see about 70 pounds, usually. In the warmer weather, you may see 110, and static pressure means gauge is hooked up, no pressure, no activity going on. Everything's just sitting here quiet like we are now. We hang our gauges here, we hook up over there. We're going to have a low side gauge and a high side gauge, and both are going to be reading the same. And that's normal. They're supposed to. There's a problem if they're not, if you've had it parked a long time. Okay, so next thing we're going to do, if we fire up the engine and we turn on the air conditioner compressor and it clicks that clutch in and it starts the inside of that compressor pumping, which is kind of like a little air compressor, but it's moving refrigerant, then it's going to start immediately pushing through its discharge line high pressure gas refrigerant through the discharge line to the condenser. All right, that pressure is going to go through the condenser, and it's automatically going to make that refrigerant start giving up. The heat that is made when it's compressed is actually going to be given up as air is blowing across the condenser. There's a liquid line after it goes in as a high pressure gas. It comes out of the condenser as a high pressure liquid. It leaves and goes through this liquid line, and you can see the liquid line right there. And it leaves, and it's a high pressure liquid right here. But you see that little pinched place right there? And these General Motors vehicles are strange, because right there's the orifice tube, and it's at a fitting here and a fitting there. This is the low side, that's the high side, and they're not 8 inches apart. Isn't that something? Usually they're on different sides of the engine compartment, like on that Sable over there, one's over here and one's over here. On that one, they're real close to one another. Okay, so what happens is when this liquid refrigerant hits that orifice, it actually turns into a low pressure liquid. And it's going, by the time it's right here, it's a low pressure liquid. It goes into the evaporator and it starts to turn into a low pressure gas. As it's turning into a low pressure gas, it's like the water that's on your body when you get out of the shower or the pool, and the air that's blowing across that evaporator from the squirrel cage fan you got in there, that's your blower motor, is going to be have the heat absorbed out of it by these cold evaporator fins, which is like a little radiator that's really, really cold in there. All right, now the water that's dripping on the ground when you turn on your air conditioner is coming off of that evaporator, because the humidity is going to cause that water to condense on there, and it drips out on the ground. It still is not completely evaporated by the time it comes out here. As a matter of fact, it should still be absorbing heat all the way to the suction port on the compressor. Now, what's going on inside here, there's a tube. That tube right there is actually going in there in such a way so that all of that refrigerant is still liquid, is going to go down into and rest in the bottom of that accumulator. There's a desiccant bag in there to absorb moisture. But there's this one here has actually got a tube that loops around so that it can't get anything except gas. Although in the very bottom of that loop there's a little tiny hole with a screen over it, and because of the fact that refrigerant oil is in here along with some liquid refrigerant, and we're basically going to pull a little bit of oil in there along with the vapor, because as the vapor travels around the bottom of that loop, it picks up some of that oil. And this is, how many of you guys ever use a chainsaw? Everybody around here in this part of the country has pulled the cord on a chainsaw and smell that smoky, exhaust and all that. And so why do you have to mix oil with a chainsaw gas? Anybody know? If you didn't mix the oil with the chainsaw gas, you'd burn up the engine. Why? Because all of the mix is going through that engine. It's being used, that little 2-cycle engine is blowing through the crankcase, and it's got that oil in it. And that's what lubricates the engine. You don't have a crankcase on that, do you? We're not like with a sump with an oil pump and all that kind of stuff. And that's why you can actually hold a chainsaw upside down. You can turn it any way you want to, like an airplane engine. And the fuel line is going into the little fuel tank, is a little floppy thing with a weighted inlet on it, and anywhere you turn it, the fuel is going to slosh to the bottom, and that little thing's going to drop. You see what I'm saying? You can always run it upside down, wherever you want to. But on this one here, it's picking up refrigerant oil that's got to be compatible with the refrigerant you're using, and it goes into the compressor, and those little pistons in the compressor are going 90 to nothing, and they have to be lubricated, and that's what lubricates them. Now, there are several different types of refrigerant oil, and if you use a refrigerant oil that's not compatible with the refrigerant you're trying to use, it's not going to mix with that oil, with that refrigerant the right way, and your compressor is going to get fried. And I've seen that before. I had one student that was going to convert a 134 system to a 12 system to a 134, and we had talked about this, we'd done it and all this kind of thing, where you would make sure that you're supposed to replace the accumulator, you're supposed to do all this stuff, and he was just taking a shortcut. And and there's like I say, there's varying different ways you can do this. A lot of the times we've seen people just take those Schrader valves out of those fittings, make sure you pull the R12 out, and you just add a little bit of oil that's the right kind that'll mix with that other, and usually they'll get away with that. Well, he didn't put anything in there. He just put fittings on there. He put R134 in there and didn't put any other kind of oil in it or change the accumulator or anything, and he wound up burning the compressor up on that car. And it was it was another student's car, and we had to take care of that problem. But the fact is, the oil's got to be compatible with whatever refrigerant you're using. That's the whole thing. So what you got is a circle, and this drawing right here that you got is a good one of it. See, there's your two heat exchangers. You see them? You got that? All right, make sure you fill that out now. Hey, you guys, the back lights are back out. I thought y'all fixed those lights. The backup lights don't work. Nothing works on it now. You told me you fixed the lights yesterday. They're not fixed. Huh? You're not fixed.
You're not fixed, and that's a personal problem.
Take care of that, mister. All right. And, so you have issues with the lights on that truck. So you guys can go. So watch what we got here. Everybody look at your schematic. Your little drawing of the refrigerant system here. Okay. This particular one, to answer your question, uses not an expansion valve, but an orifice tube. It does not use an expansion valve. Oh, here's something else I wanted to tell you too. If you have a system that uses an expansion valve, it is always going to have a receiver dryer, which is in the liquid line, or it's in the end of the condenser. In other words, the receiver dryer is going to be in the end of the condenser along sock, and I got one over here. These right here. This right here is a receiver dryer, like a later model car. I don't remember what we changed this off of, but anyway, that's in the liquid line, and this right here is the one that came out of that 07 Honda CRV. That's a desiccant bag that's mounted in a little thing that's shaped like this. It's made into the side of the condenser. When it's made into the side of the condenser, then that condenser is called a subcooler, because not only does it allow the refrigerant to turn back into a liquid, it runs it through into a separate part of the condenser assembly, if you want to call it that, and it cools it off in addition to making it change into a liquid. All right, so that's a desiccant bag. Got a lot of little. Have you seen those little packs of stuff in pills and stuff? It says "Do not eat."
Yeah.
You understand? That's what the same stuff. It's a desiccant bag. It's silica gel is what it amounts to. And anyway, but this is a receiver dryer. Look at the difference in the size of that. That receiver dryer is it does about the same job as this, but it's mostly for desiccant purposes. And the expansion valve on some of them is a little block that's mounted right here. You'll just see a suction line and a liquid line going right into it without a can. And this receiver dryer will be mounted somewhere over here, or on the end of the condenser. So that's the difference between those. And remember this, burn this in. If it has a orifice tube, it will have an accumulator like that. If it has an expansion valve, it will typically have, and I'm saying typically because I'm sure there's little caveats here, it will typically have a receiver dryer. Got it? It's got a receiver dryer. This will be in the liquid line in the high side, and because it's in the high side, it's smaller. Why do they make it smaller? Because it's in the high side. What does the pressure run? If this thing's running, you may see 325, 350 pounds of pressure in its high side. If you've got PSI that's more, you're going to have a smaller tank, because the bigger the tank is, the less PSI that it can safely handle. Got it? Because you got more square inches, right? All right. So you're going to make it littler like that typically if you've got that way. Okay. So now then, what we have, let's say, what's the next? Does it use an orifice tube? Does it use an expansion valve? Is there another part to that sheet, or are you just looking at the, that's about it, isn't it, on that? Okay, the next sheet is a different sheet. All right, go ahead and kill that, and I want you guys...